Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Bridget. I'm a nurse practitioner. Today, I will be talking about ego defense mechanisms. If you don't want to hear me talk, you can purchase this PowerPoint on Etsy, or you can become a Patreon member and have access to all of the PowerPoints, not just this one. Well, without further ado, let's get started. This is specifically for mental health nursing and discussing different types of ego defense mechanisms. So, first, what are the origins? Ego defense mechanisms are unconscious psychological strategies people use to protect themselves from feelings of anxiety, unpleasant emotions, or threatening thoughts. These mechanisms were first proposed by Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, and later expanded upon by other psychologists. Your textbooks may vary and may have different ego defense mechanisms, but I'm going over the most common ones. The first one is compensation, covering up a real or perceived weakness by overemphasizing or excelling in one area in order to make up for perceived deficiencies in another area. An example of compensation would be social compensation, seeking popularity, social approval, or being excessively outgoing to compensate for feelings of social inadequacy or loneliness. Other examples of compensation can include intellectual compensation, focusing on academic achievements or intellectual pursuits to compensate for perceived shortcomings in other areas. Another example would be someone who feels inadequate in physical abilities might compensate by excelling in intellectual pursuits or developing a strong sense of humor. Similarly, an individual who feels emotionally insecure might compensate by seeking power, status, or wealth to bolster their self-worth. Physical compensation can be overcompensating in physical strength, fitness, or appearance to compensate for feelings of weakness or insecurity. Work professional compensation is overworking or striving for professional success to compensate for personal insecurities or lack of fulfillment in other areas. While compensation can provide a sense of mastery or competence in certain aspects of life, relying solely on compensation as a defense mechanism can lead to imbalances and potential issues in other areas. It's important for individuals to find a balance and address underlying insecurities rather than relying solely on compensatory strategies to cope with them. Therapy or self reflection can be helpful in understanding and managing these defense mechanisms. And denial is refusing to acknowledge or accept reality because it's too distressing. An example of this might be someone diagnosed with a terminal illness might deny the diagnosis, refusing to believe it's true. Displacement. Emotions, impulses, or desires that are deemed unacceptable or difficult to express towards their actual source are redirected or shifted onto a substitute target. This substitute target is typically less threatening or safer to express these emotions toward. The transfer of feelings from one target to another that is considered less threatening or that is neutral. So, an example might be a patient is angry with the physician and does not express it, but becomes verbally abusive with the nurse. So, for example, with displacement, imagine a person who experiences a frustrating day at work. They're angry at their boss, but unable to express that anger directly. Instead, they come home and vent their frustration by snapping at a family member over a trivial issue. In this scenario, the anger towards the boss is displaced onto the family member who becomes the substitute target for the expressed anger. Displacement often occurs unconsciously as a way to cope with emotions or impulses that are perceived as unacceptable or too risky to direct towards their original source. And by redirecting these feelings towards a substitute target, individuals may feel a temporary sense of relief or release, even though the underlying issue remains unresolved. While displacement can serve as a short term coping mechanism, it's essential to address the root cause of the emotions or impulses to achieve long term emotional well being. Understanding and becoming aware of the patterns of displacement can be helpful in managing and addressing the original feelings in a healthier manner. Therapy can also be beneficial in exploring and working through these underlying emotions. With identification, the key word here is an attempt to increase self worth. And this is done by adopting characteristics, behaviors, or traits of someone else in order to bolster one's self esteem or cope with feelings of inadequacy. It's a psychological process where an individual models himself after another person, often someone admired or seen as powerful or successful, in an attempt to enhance their self image or reduce anxiety. An example might be a child. A child might identify with a parent or a celebrity they admire and emulate their behavior, mannerisms, or attitudes. Some additional information about identification is that there's direct identification, and this occurs when an individual identifies with specific qualities or attributes of another person. So, direct identification, this occurs when an individual identifies with specific qualities or attributes of another person. Introjective identification, in this case, rather than simply imitating external behaviors, an individual internalizes the perceived characteristics or values of another person. So, for example, someone might identify with a mentor's work ethic or moral values and strive to integrate those qualities into their own personality. I will tell you now, in nursing, mental health nursing undergrad, you will not go as deep as direct identification or introjective identification. This is just extra knowledge. If this is just additional knowledge, the primary thing you need to know for identification is that it's an attempt to increase self-worth, and that it's because you're identifying with somebody else and you're trying to emulate their behaviors. Identification can serve as a way to find role models or sources of inspiration, allowing individuals to learn and grow. However, excessive or rigid identification can lead to problems if it results in a loss of one's authentic self or a constant struggle to live up to unrealistic standards set by the person being emulated. In some cases, identification can help individuals adapt to new situations or acquire positive traits. Still, it's essential for personal growth to balance the positive aspects of identification with maintaining one's individuality and authenticity. Therapy or self reflection can aid in understanding the motivations behind identification and in fostering a healthy sense of self that integrates desirable qualities without losing one's unique identity. Intellectualization. This is an attempt to avoid expressing actual emotions with a stressful situation by using the intellectual processes of logic, reasoning, and analysis. So, for example, someone receives a serious medical diagnosis, they might respond by delving deeply into medical literature, statistics, and treatment options, discussing the topic in a detached and analytical manner rather than acknowledging and expressing their fears, sadness, or anxiety about the diagnosis. While intellectualization can be a helpful way to organize thoughts and gain understanding, relying solely on this defense mechanism can create a disconnect between thoughts and emotions. It can also prevent individuals from fully processing and dealing with their underlying feelings, potentially leading to unresolved emotional issues. Therapy often aims to help individuals strike a balance between intellectual understanding and emotional awareness, encouraging individuals to acknowledge and express their feelings while also using their intellect to comprehend and process those emotions can lead to a more holistic and healthier approach to dealing with challenging situations. Introjection. Integrating the beliefs and values of another individual into one's own ego structure. Prefix intro means inwardly. So the example here is that children integrate their parents' value system into the process of conscience formation. A child says to a friend, "Don't cheat, it's wrong." Negative example of this would be learned racism. So racism isn't born, it's taught. A child that is a racist is because it learned it from somewhere and incorporated those values into their belief system because they were told that a certain race is inferior to what they are. And this is why it's so important to be a positive role model for your children and for children in general so that they integrate positive value systems instead of faulty biased ones. Added bonus material, positive introjection. This occurs when an individual internalizes positive qualities, values, or traits from others that they admire or perceive as desirable. For instance, a person might adopt the moral values of a respected authority figure without questioning or evaluating them critically. And negative introjection, in this case, an individual internalizes negative beliefs, criticisms, or attitudes projected onto them by others or society. So, for example, someone might internalize harsh judgments from a parent or society and incorporate those negative views into their own self concept, leading to a low self esteem. So, this is why it's so important that you are cautious also to how you speak to your children. Instead of, don't say things like, "Are you stupid?" or "You're so stupid." Things of that sort. Then they will internalize those negative beliefs and be like, well, that's why I failed school because I'm just stupid. Therapy often involves helping individuals differentiate between internalized beliefs or values that are genuinely aligned with their authentic self and those that have been introjected without conscious evaluation. By fostering self awareness and critical thinking, individuals can discern which beliefs or values truly resonate with their identity and make conscious choices about what to integrate into their sense of self. Isolation, I put it in parentheses, another term for it could be compartmentalizing. So it's separating a thought or memory from the feeling, tone, or emotion associated with it. For example, an individual might discuss a past traumatic experience, such as the loss of a loved one, in a very matter of fact manner, seemingly detached from any emotional response. And this doesn't mean they don't feel emotions, rather, they have separated the emotions from the thoughts or memories associated with the event. Isolation can be a way for individuals to cope with highly distressing or traumatic experiences temporarily. However, it can also hinder emotional processing and healing in the long run by preventing the integration of emotions with the associated memories. Therapy often involves helping individuals reconnect with and process the emotions connected to these isolated thoughts or experiencing, allowing for a more integrated and healthier emotional response to past events. Projection. This is often tested on as well. Denial, projection, they're frequently tested on. Repression and suppression. Projection, think of a projector and you are projecting what is within outwardly. So it's attributing one's own undesirable feelings, impulses, or thoughts onto others. So, for example, someone who has repressed aggressive tendencies might accuse others of being aggressive when they themselves are the aggressive ones. Rationalization. Creating logical or socially acceptable explanations to justify one's behaviors, beliefs, or feelings, attempting to make excuses or formulate logical reasons to justify unaccepting feelings or behaviors. This rationalization is often the defense mechanism that is used to rationalize really uh, disgusting behavior sometimes. Now, I kind of put a lighthearted example for like the treat yourself quote from Parts and Rec, where that guy was always like, treat yourself. But it's, for example, buying expensive items. Someone might rationalize splurging on expensive items by convincing themselves that they deserve it due to hard work or stress, avoiding confronting potential financial irresponsibility. So there's nothing wrong with treating yourself. There's nothing wrong with buying yourself nice things. But if, for example, you can't afford to pay rent that month, but you're treating yourself to a $500 purse, then that is rationalization. You're using rationalization to justify an unhealthy behavior when you should be putting that money towards rent. Other examples of rationalization might be if a student fails an exam, it's a student who performs poorly on an exam. They might rationalize the outcome by blaming the test difficulty, the teacher's teaching style, or external distractions rather than acknowledging their lack of preparation or effort. Procrastination, someone who consistently procrastinates might rationalize their behavior by saying they work better under pressure or that they have too many tasks to handle at once, avoiding the acknowledgement of underlying anxiety or fear of failure. Relationship issues in a failing relationship, one partner might rationalize their partner's neglect or mistreatment by saying they're stressed at work or going through a difficult time, excusing the behavior rather than confronting the underlying problems in the relationship. A lot of women that come from abusive pasts might rationalize their partner's I can't say that word too much, the ABUSIVE, because it flags it, but they might rationalize their partner's ABUSIVE behavior, instead of saying, no, this is unhealthy behavior from my partner and I'm not going to put up with it. Unhealthy habits. A person who smokes might rationalize their habit by focusing on the stress relief it provides or by saying that it's a way to socialize rather than acknowledging the health risks associated with smoking. Reaction formation. Expressing thoughts, feelings, or behaviors that are contrary to one's true feelings, often to protect oneself from the discomfort of acknowledging or facing their genuine emotions, preventing unacceptable or undesirable thoughts or behaviors from being expressed by exaggerating opposite thoughts or types of behaviors. So, for example, Maria hates nursing. She went to nursing school to please her parents. During career days, she speaks to prospective students about the excellence of nursing as a career. And we all know, especially I'm a minority, and as a minority, our parents tend to put a lot of pressure on us. They don't always want us to pursue our dreams. They value um, education over pursuing our dreams. They want us all to be either like lawyers, doctors, maybe engineer. Like they put a lot of pressure to excel. So there's a lot of people that maybe the career they went into wasn't the career they wanted, but they did it for their parents. So that would be an example of reaction formation is this person, for example, hates nursing, but she is talking to others about how excellent nursing is. Regression. Regress, it sounds just like what it is. It's to go backwards. So regression, think of like regression and reverse, RE for reverse, regression, you're going backwards. And it's reverting to earlier, more childlike behavior in the face of stress or difficulty. This is often tested on in pediatrics, where children will regress to an earlier stage of development. So when 2-year-old Michael is hospitalized for tonsillitis, he will only drink from a bottle, although his mother states he has been drinking from a cup for 6 months. Other examples of regression might be adult temper tantrums when faced with a situation causing extreme frustration or stress. An adult might respond with a tantrum, displaying behaviors reminiscent of a child throwing a temper tantrum, screaming, crying, or becoming physically agitated. Thumb sucking or nail biting. Under stress or anxiety, an individual might unconsciously resort to comforting behaviors from childhood, such as thumb sucking or nail biting, seeking the same soothing effect experienced in childhood. Clinginess and dependence. During times of heightened stress or insecurity, a person might become excessively clingy, seeking constant reassurance, attention, or support from others, similar to the behavior of a dependent child. Baby talk or childish speech patterns. When feeling overwhelmed, an individual might unconsciously adopt a higher pitched voice or use simplified language resembling the speech patterns of a young child. Regression in personal care. Under significant stress or trauma, an individual might neglect personal hygiene or self care routines, reverting to behaviors more typical of a younger age when they relied on others to meet their needs. Retreating to infantile activities. During times of stress, someone might retreat to activities they enjoyed as a child, such as playing with toys or seeking comfort in activities typically associated with a younger age group. The key word with repression is involuntarily. Involuntarily blocking unpleasant feelings and experiencing from one's awareness. I have a really sad story about this. I can't remember in which book I read it, but trigger warning. This is going to be discussing ABUSE. There was a lady that whenever she was around a specific individual, she would get like nauseous and knots in her stomach. Her own body was telling her something was off, but she didn't know why that was. She just felt physically ill, but she wasn't aware of why. She had no recollection of anything. And one day she was going through pictures of her as a child and she saw she was on this person's lap. And all of a sudden, the memories came flooding back that this person had inappropriately touched her and done things to her that she had completely blocked out, repressed those memories. So repression is involuntary, and it's unconsciously pushing painful or distressing thoughts or memories out of conscious awareness. They're not consciously aware of it. This can help protect a person from experiencing emotional pain associated with those thoughts or memories. It's a way of your brain trying to protect you. Another example would be an accident victim can remember nothing about an accident. Sublimation is channeling unaccepted impulses or emotions into socially acceptable outlets. So someone with aggressive tendencies might channel that energy into sports or other competitive activities. Someone who likes to fight might go into boxing. Suppression is another frequently tested on. Imagine that voluntarily is in red. If you purchase this PowerPoint, I would highlight voluntarily. That is the keyword with suppression, that you're voluntarily blocking unpleasant feelings and experiences from one's awareness. Like I said before, repression and suppression are frequently tested on. And suppression is voluntarily blocking unpleasant feelings and experiences from one's own awareness. It's an ego defense mechanism where individuals consciously and intentionally push away or hold back thoughts, emotions, impulses, or memories that they find distressing, unacceptable, or difficult to handle. Unlike repression, which is an unconscious mechanism, suppression involves a conscious effort to avoid dealing with certain aspect of one's inner experiences. So, for example, a person might suppress their feelings of grief after the loss of a loved one when in public or during social interactions. So, let's say a loved one passed away, they're going to stay busy, they're going to do everything in their power to not think about them, because if they do, they may just start bawling in public. So, they consciously try to avoid thoughts or expressions of sorrow to avoid discomforting others or to maintain composure in public settings. Undoing is symbolically negating or canceling out an experience that one finds intolerable. Individuals attempt to counteract or undo a previous thought, feeling, or action by engaging in behaviors that aim to reverse or negate the undesirable thought, feeling, or behavior. It involves trying to compensate for perceived wrongdoing or negative impulses by performing actions that are opposite of those thoughts or behaviors. So, for example, Roger cheated on his wife. On his way home, he decides to buy her a large bouquet of flowers. So, here's how undoing typically works: there's a recognition of negative thoughts or actions, and an individual becomes aware of thoughts, feelings, or impulses that they perceive as inappropriate or unacceptable or morally wrong. So they try to counteract their behavior. And to alleviate this guilt, anxiety, or discomfort from these thoughts or actions, the person engages in actions or thoughts that are meant to negate or reverse the negative thoughts or behaviors. So, symbolic or compensatory actions, these actions may be symbolic gestures, rituals, or compensatory behaviors aimed at undoing the perceived wrong. For instance, someone feeling guilty about a negative thought might engage in an act of kindness to offset the guilt. Other additional examples would be apology as undoing. Someone who has had a negative thought about a friend might excessively compliment or praise that friend afterward, trying to counteract or undo the negative thought with positive actions or words. Charitable acts as undoing: someone experiencing feelings of greed or materialism might engage in excessive charitable acts or donate money to offset the guilt associated with their perceived selfishness. I'm not saying that every person that does a charitable act is using the ego defense mechanism of undoing, but for some, this may be the cause. Undoing can provide a temporary sense of relief from guilt or anxiety associated with negative thoughts or actions. However, if used excessively or rigidly, it might lead to compulsive or ritualistic behaviors and could prevent the individual from addressing the underlying issues causing the distress. Therapy often involves exploring the root causes of those feelings and helping individuals find healthier ways to manage guilt or anxiety. Quiz time. Which of the following is an example of the ego defense mechanism known as displacement? Is it A, a patient is diagnosed with a terminal illness but refuses to acknowledge the diagnosis? B, a nurse who is frustrated with a physician yells at a colleague later in the day? C, a person channels aggressive impulses into playing competitive sports? Or D, a student blames their failure on the exam's difficulty level? Feel free to pause if you want to think about this more. But this week will be ego defense mechanisms. I'm going to try and get back to more of education type of content. So tune in maybe Wednesday for an ego defense mechanism quiz to see if you grasp the concepts from this quote unquote lecture, I suppose. Again, if you want to purchase this PowerPoint, it is available on Etsy, or a link will be in the description below, or you can become a member on Patreon and have access to all my PowerPoints. The correct answer is displacement, which was B. Displacement involves redirecting emotions, typically unacceptable ones from the original source toward a less threatening or safer target. In this case, the nurse, feeling frustrated with the doctor, the original source, redirects their anger toward a colleague, which they view as a safer target. Option C describes sublimation, where unacceptable impulses are redirected into socially acceptable activities. Option A is an example of denial, where the person refuses to acknowledge a distressing reality. And option D is an example of rationalization, where the student justifies their failure by blaming external factors. We have reached the end. Once again, thank you so much for watching. You can purchase this PowerPoint on Etsy or become a patron on Patreon. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.